Welcome al podcast de Palante Nonprofits. I'm your host, Andrea Ortega, y estoy super excited to dive into the world of nonprofits. In Spanglish. En cada episodio exploraremos temas como leadership, fundraising, compliance, utilizar tecnología para el cambio y mucho más. We are changemakers y estamos aquí para inspirar, educar and empower a las comunidades hispanas en todo el mundo. Let's navigate the sector juntos. Palante Nonprofits. Hi everybody, I'm Andrea Ortega and I'm so excited para introducirles aquí a Ashley Rivera Mercado. Ashley is Orlando-based marketing communications professional with a wealth of experience in content creation, campaign strategy, and social media management. Ella is una huge advocate for our community, and because of that, she has channeled her passion into founding Mujeres in Marketing, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering Latinas in the marketing, advertising, and communications industry. Con su trabajo with Mujeres in Marketing, Ashley is helping to create spaces where Latina professionals can see themselves represented and supported as they pursue their goals and dreams. Ashley, it's super amazing to have you here. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Andrea. So I guess to try to summarize my life, I'm originally from Puerto Rico. Yo nací en Yauco. It's not so small anymore, but it's a small town on the southwest side of the island, about 15, 20 minutes from Ponce. So I was born there and then I moved to the US with my family when I was 3 years old. I'm the youngest of three girls and my parents moved, and I say we have like a very typical like immigrant experience without needing to go through the immigration process. So it was a lot of, hablamos español en casa porque mami siempre dijo las escuelas te van a enseñar inglés, So my mom was very adamant on maintaining the culture and the language. And I spent every summer in Puerto Rico growing up. So my family originally moved to Ohio, decided we hated the cold, and then we moved to Orlando. So yeah, I grew up mostly in Winter Park. So that is a very like affluent community within Orlando, but I was not affluent. My mom just wanted to make sure we had access to the best schools and stuff. So yeah, I grew up in Winter Park and I graduated there. I went to Valencia Community College, and then I went to UCF where I worked while I was an undergrad. Got my bachelor's in international studies with a minor in intelligence and national security. And then I recently graduated this past year with my MBA as well. So it's kind of my professional education history.
Me encanta. I love that. I love mujeres, looking for always learn and get their education. And, our parents, I think, really instilled in us. So congratulations. All right. So before we get into our discussion, so this episode is all about marketing. And la razón por qué invité a Ashley is because, one, she just started her nonprofit, and a lot of my listeners are more in that formation stage. But two, there's a lot of parallel when you're marketing. It doesn't matter who you're marketing for. There's a lot of parallels into, the basics of why you should do it. And for me, one of those basics is authenticity. So Ashley, I'd love to know for you how you're going to be approaching this in Mujeres in Marketing and how you've approached this in your past roles. Why is authenticity so important as a marketing strategy? And maybe share an example of a campaign that you felt that you've led, marketing with. And yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, of course. So I just want to preface this that I had a very non-traditional break into the marketing field. So as I said, I worked at UCF for about 6 years. I just left higher education last February, and I currently work in the technology space, also doing marketing functions. So I do say that authenticity is very important in non-profit approaches, specifically just because, you're publicly funded. That's like a big thing. So like I have always maintained, at least I had good bosses, right? That were like, we're publicly funded. We're here to serve the public. That's like the most important thing when you're communicating a message is that when you are using the public's money, you do not operate as like a private individual. You operate as like a public servant. So I always viewed myself as that when I worked at UCF, and I held many different roles, primarily in grad admissions, but I also worked with international students. I worked in social media and marketing functions at UCF for two different colleges. So really, it was important, like And especially now, as I carry that from working full time in the for-profit space now and working in Mujeres in marketing on the side, I still have that in mind as a nonprofit organization, is like I serve the public, I don't serve myself. So, it's very like, I don't know, that's kind of romantic how to view it, but it's true. It's like when you don't use your own dollars, you must act in service of the public. So one thing that I will say is like sharing examples of like making or breaking a campaign, it's very important, at least in my experience, to constantly understand where your target demographic is, what their mindset is, what they're thinking. And that I kind of broke into marketing working at Loose Media. One of my first jobs was managing an Instagram account for a not-for-profit organization called Florida Rising that was intent on mobilizing progressive Latinas to vote. So a big thing there was Latinas voting as immigrants in Florida, and especially the progressive realm where a lot of Latinas don't identify as progressives. So it was really important to maintain authenticity, and that involved being like, hey, this is how we grow up culturally, pero no tenemos que seguir con lo mismo. We can be like progressive and break out of these traditional norms that we're taught of, being the subservient daughter or being like, the caretaker. We can vote in line with our younger, more progressive views. So that was really important. And honestly, like the engagement on that account was huge. We were really big in South Florida. That was during the Trump administration, like run for president, because they were targeting like Latinos the most with misinformation, especially when it came to COVID and voting rights. So that was really important in maintaining authenticity, was just meeting people where they're at. Like, hey, this is what you hear. This is not the truth. And this is where you could be with the truth. So long answer, but
no, I love that. And I didn't even pay you to say that. A lot of nonprofits I work with, the very first step is, why don't I own the nonprofit? Can someone vote me out? Why everything? It's like the very first thing I have to get through, them, is that it's it's publicly funded. That's what 501c3 public charity status means. And so I love that you hit that on the nail. And I love that you're starting out, with that really, for Mujeres in marketing. I think that's one of the reasons you're going to be successful, because when you have that responsibility and that weight early on, it helps you make choices to get you to be successful, like as a founder of a nonprofit. If you know a little bit about founder syndrome, there's a lot of people that experience that whenever they start a nonprofit. They want to do everything and own anything, and they don't allow the organization to grow or make the decisions that's in best of the interests of the public. So you really hit it on the nail. And I didn't know about your political background, so I really love that. It is an election year, so no matter what, like we gotta be talking about it. And I didn't even think we were gonna get to generational trauma, but I love that you're breaking all these kind of stereotypes by staying authentic, right? And that goes through my kind of the next question, which is on storytelling. And you already kind of gave an example, but just to continue putting you on the spot with Mujeres in marketing, like, how are you going to use storytelling to connect more authentically with the supporters? Like, what are going to be kind of your next steps? And like, how does a marketer story tell for marketing? I'm really curious, there.
That's a good question. That's not what I've gotten, but I think it's less so about marketing. That's more just the industry we're in, right? Because Mujeres in marketing came from a place of need. It came from not seeing myself represented in spaces. And it came from being someone who I consider myself a creative person. I lead marketing strategies. I create content. I do it for Mujeres in marketing. I do it in my day job. I'm a photographer on the side, I've always loved music, all these things really tie together. And I think connecting more authentically with our supporters, one thing that I think appeals to a lot of people when I talk about MiM is that my number one goal is to get my people paid. So I think that's one thing people don't understand is Latinas, we're one of the lowest paid demographics in the United States, but we're also one of the ones that have the highest graduation rates from higher education institutions. So the data supports us being well compensated professionals and taking up space. But when you look at the demographics spread across the C-suite or higher level leadership positions, we are not well represented. So I really created MiM because I was well, I have my success story, shifting from higher education to tech and being like a well-compensated person who makes six figures, like that is a huge accomplishment at my age, but I want everyone to have that story. I don't want to walk into a room and be special. And I think that is what appeals to people, is that I speak so honestly about like us needing to be compensated well, and Mujeres in Marketing equipping our members with those tools to reach the C-suite, like to be able to achieve their dreams effectively. And I think the best practices come in like building your community authentically, giving people the space to network, giving people the space to connect, but also like just being direct about things. Like I was even talking to a male coworker at work recently, and he's like, "Oh, I was so shy about asking people how much they made." And I'm like, "Why? That's federally protected." Like, yeah. And even he's like, "Yeah, I never did that." I was like, "Well, how much do you make?" And he was kind of caught off guard, but he told me, and I was like, "Yeah, I make this." So, and I was like, "You see how like not weird that is to just
Yeah.
like so that's part of the storytelling, right? Is like remaining authentic and having those conversations, but also just driving it with the morals and values we all share, which is really just supporting each other.
Oh my God, I love that. So many really awesome points there on, hitting. I love that you use also statistics and data. To my nonprofits out there, if you're going out to any supporters or asking for major gifts or trying to apply for a grant and you don't have this kind of data and background on the issue or the problem, like she sold me. I'm gonna be your next donor. Like that. Those are the kind of like her elevator pitch right now to Mujeres in Marketing has data, explains the problem and how she's gonna go about it, and that's so important. And just thank you so much for bringing all that. It's funny because I know it, but I constantly need a reminder of the Latina pay gap. And then in terms of like to move up to C-suite, mentorship opportunities, and being able to be in the room and all those kind of things. Algo también que me encantaste is like talk about your salary. Gente, ask the salary. Talk to your. Si van a chismosear and drink coffee, like por lo menos chismoseen. There's something that's gonna make you better or really like help you understand. Because yes, talking about your pay is federally funded and protected. So, but federally funded. I write a lot of grants, guys. Federally protected. So yeah, awesome. All right. So next question, Ashley. When I met you, you talked a little bit about your background and where you are now in the tech space. And you also mentioned something really cool, that you work for internal communications. And I thought that was really interesting. One, I've also worked in a tech space, and very important, the way you talk to your employees and the way you talk with each other. But like, how do you plan on using those strategies that you've learned and, everything that you've done to communicate internally with Mujeres in Marketing and your staff? And as you grow, you mentioned you have a founding board. So like maybe give some tips to these nonprofits around like internal communications being as important as external communications.
Yeah, of course. So, for like a full overview, I do oversee internal communications at my company, but I also oversee like some marketing functions as well. So I'm kind of a generalist. I will say though, like internal communication strategies, like your biggest stakeholder is always going to be your employees. That's your labor force. Those are your doers. Those are your executors. Like if you don't have buy-in from your employees, you will not be able to execute on delivering a product. That's like a fundamental foundation to internal communications. So it's very important to manage your internal comms effectively. And I think to me, what that looks like is, as like a 4-woman show, I don't own MiM. We are a nonprofit, but I am the founder on a board of 4 founding board members. So, my founding board members all contribute their skills in very different ways. And really what we do is like, we make sure we have regular touch bases. Like I text my VP like every couple of days. I ask her a quick question, or I tag her on a Monday board. Having a project management software is very important to laying the foundation to executing on those projects. She was very gracious in donating Monday for us to use, which is very appropriate as like a Marcom nonprofit using Monday. So, it's really important, I think, to build a strong foundation with other people who believe in your mission, right? Like, and those people that are willing to put their heart and soul into it the way my board has, lending their networks, lending their ears. And really the strategies that help us succeed are really letting, like I, as a leader, I do not believe in micromanaging people. I do believe in letting people own their work. But I also believe as a founder, it is my job to push the goals of the org along, right? So while everyone's like hyper focused on their tasks, I'm always looking at the bigger picture. Where am I giving my energy to that will lend itself to MIM 6 months from now, a year from now? How does interfacing with this individual benefit MIM down the road? Or how does it benefit us within the next 90 days? Like I try to be intentional with my energy because I only have so much of it. When time is your most limited currency, you have to be that much more intentional with where you put it. So I do think founders, like, while we do get stuck in like pushing everything along, it's also important just to lean on your board sometimes and be like, hey, like, I can't own this. Who can own this? Or who can we get to own this? And what resources do we need? What do I need to do to get us those resources? So those are kind of like the strategies.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you want to emphasize, of course, just it's a team effort, right? A lot of my clients also sometimes make the mistake of not getting the right board members as their founding board, and that could really push people back. And I always tell people, because I worked a lot in formation, and that's really key. Otherwise, you're going to burn out. You're going to feel like you're the only one doing it. Your pockets are going to feel it, right? Because it's expensive to start a nonprofit and you're not going to move along. So I love that you also gave a shout out to tech. Like you have to use project management softwares to stay afloat, even in the early stages. And I love that you've incorporated that very early on. So my last question is kind of like, and you already touched this because it kind of relates to the first question, how you incorporate authenticity in marketing strategies. But can you talk to me? I'm going to kind of flip it a little bit with the sub question in there. Like, how do, as a nonprofit, how do you help like determine your audience, and how do you then be authentic to them, right? So, I mean, Mujeres, so obviously you can probably, definitely a gender, definitely, or someone who identifies as a woman, but like, then there's the age. Are you catering to millennials, Gen Z? Like, how as a marketer do you keep track of your audience, and how do you plan to apply those things into the nonprofit space?
Yeah, of course. So any good marketer will tell you to review your social stats to see your audience. So that's a big thing, is like you really learn, tú sabes, uno siempre está en Instagram, pero tiene que como que usarlo. So I always tell people, like, turn on the professional settings, look at who's engaging with your content, see what the distribution is across like gender and age. But MIM launched knowing what our audience was. We knew very early on that we were appealing to the vast amount of Latina marketers that exist in the US. And again, that comes supported by data, right? So one thing I noticed is that when I worked in marketing, like all the other marketers I talked to were Latinas. And I was like, why is everyone Latina? Like, I'm Latina, they're Latina. Like, why is everyone Latina? And then, I went on to do some professional recruiting as part of my MBA. And then I was put in rooms where there was no one like me. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Like, where am I represented more across like these professional like opportunities que siempre se están como presentando. And that's when I kind of looked at some studies done, and I saw that it's about half of the marketers in the United States are women. And then around 13% of those are Latinos, like as a demographic. So assuming that maybe like half of the Latino demographic is women, like Latinas, self-identifying Latinas, that's still a significant amount of the population in the industry, right? Like when you account for that percentage of the total population, working population in the United States, that's easily in the millions, right? So that's when I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like there's a lot more of us than I thought. And then that's when I was like, okay, that's how we are effectively going to identify our audience, because we do exist. We are almost like a silent majority in some of these roles, but where is our advocacy, right? And that's where we came in, and again, as we continue like pushing our mission of like advancing, there's a lot of nonprofits that use the word like advancing or like acknowledging potential, which I have like a bone to pick with those words. My thing is realizing potential, because to me, there's a difference between acknowledging someone has potential and realizing their potential. So when we do things in the future, like launching our mentorship program, it's going to be beyond mentorship. It's going to be encouraging sponsorship. are you willing to take a personal investment in your mentee's professional development? Because at that point, you're going to be realizing their potential. You're not just going to be acknowledging it. You're going to be putting your reputation, your connections on the line to advance their career. That is what I want to see. I don't want to see people being like, oh, wow, yeah, you have a lot of great potential, but like, whatever. No, I want it to be like, hey, this person's hiring. You're about to graduate. I'm going to make sure I talk to them. Right? Because that's like what everyone else gets. Why don't Latinas have that? So.
Oh my God. Okay, first of all, you could be, by the way, a professional like fundraiser as well, because you know very well how to really what people call like closing the sale or making the ask. And that's something that I want every nonprofit founder listening or anybody who runs a nonprofit. You have to kind of make the ask and hold people accountable to invest financially. That's the biggest thing too with your board, right? You can't just have your prima serve on the board because you need to put a name on the form. Like you need someone who's going to invest time and their pocket to serve on the board and further the mission or idea you came up with. That's so important. I also love the language there because words matter. So like realizing it is a commitment of not just like, oh, that's cute. You're cute. You know how to do things. Like you're awesome. You know how to do this. Let me connect you so that other people can realize your gifts too. I'm going to start using realize. You are absolutely right. We're going to make that a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that. That was really my last question, but I want to piggyback because I know that if anybody listens to this, which I hope you do, I know that they'll be super curious when you mentioned the business, like statistics on the business account. And I know a lot of funders, because I work with a lot of grassroots, so they're not big. They're not big in the sense like maybe they don't have like a head of marketing, but they're big in the sense that they're like feeding, you know, like huge amounts of people, or they're helping huge amounts of people on the streets get shelter, you know, so they're doing really big missions, but they might not understand, like, are you saying there's a difference from a personal Instagram account to a business Instagram account and how to utilize those tools?
Yeah.
If you could drop some hints there, I know that they would love that.
Yeah, of course. I think a lot of people don't understand is like you can make an Instagram account, but it's in your best interest to turn on professional tools. Like classify yourself. So when you go on the Mujeres in Marketing Instagram, it says nonprofit organization because that is what we are. I don't want anyone going on there and being like, oh, what is this? Like an agency? Because sometimes people think we're an agency. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But no, like turn on your professional tools, use your dashboards. It gives you advanced insights on like who's really ingesting your content. It'll give you that age range I talked about, demographics, the main cities where like your visitors are located. So if you're running very small, like targeted campaigns in one specific like physical area, you could be like, oh, well, this is a great place to like go do an event because the majority of our viewers are like in Chicago or something, you know, or it can even help you expand your operations where you're like, oh, we're mostly in Miami. We need to expand to Chicago or something. You know, that really helps us even at Mujeres in Marketing understand like, you know, we are Orlando based and we are a hyper local group right now, but the intent is to become national. And with that, we already have our target cities identified because of where our viewers are. So, and it really takes the guesswork out of it. So guys, like turn on the professional tools on Instagram.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's both for the community and to identify new donors, right? Whenever you're looking for new donors, you can definitely see who's been following your page and who's been following along. Bueno, Ashley, that was awesome. And I actually think you ended with some really cool things that people can take back and see, for their own marketing strategies. So I want to thank everybody for today's episode, especially you, Ashley, for being here. I hope you found our conversation inspiring and informative. I do encourage everybody to stay connected with us and obviously look up Mujeres in Marketing on Instagram, Facebook. And we do have a Facebook group for Palante nonprofits where I regularly announce upcoming grant opportunities and share valuable resources. So please go ahead and join our newsletter and you'll get invited to be added to that group. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. And Ashley, do you have any closing remarks before I say goodbye?
Nothing. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Yay. And to your point, just follow us on social. We'll be around.
Yes. All right. Hasta luego y pa'lante nonprofits.